Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kim Munzo, and I'm from Aspire EDU. You may have heard of our solutions, Dropout Detective and Instructor Insight, and we just launched a third one this week called Retention Radar. So we're pleased to have all of you with us this afternoon. I think most of you are probably here to see Kona, actually, right? We have an excellent group of our existing clients, long-term clients with us today, and we're going to talk about how they manage their student retention efforts and hope that you'll be able to get some usable, practical tips out of this session. So I will go ahead and introduce our panelists here. Ms. Kona Jones from Richland Community College, Mr. Tony Grace from Pierce College, and Mr. Kris Bickell from University of Bridgeport. All right, so some of the things that we're going to talk about are how we monitor at-risk students, how we identify them, but more importantly, how you can intervene and what actually works. So Kona, I'm going to start with you. All right, so I know that you're very active in identifying the at-risk students through the use of Dropout Detective, but tell me, what are your best strategies once you've identified the at-risk students? What are your top 3 strategies?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we really have our faculty on board with us. If we didn't have the faculty involved, I don't think we could achieve the level of success we can. So I think the biggest thing is making sure you have your faculty involved, so that way the faculty can maybe be that first level of contact, or even that first level to let you know, hey, no, I've already been in contact with that student, this is what the situation is. Or, no, you're right, that student has just dropped off the face of the earth, I don't know what's going on. So I think the first one is just faculty, making sure you and your faculty are on the same page with how things go. Along with that is definitely having your advisors, and this is school dependent, but for us, it's definitely having our advisors. We have assigned advising, and so I can look up, run a report and say, oh, that student goes with this advisor, contact that advisor and say, okay, I've talked to the teacher doesn't know what's going on, we need you to start intervening. And then along with that, we just have a really good relationship with all of our support services. So once we identify that student and someone is able to reach out and connect with that student, whether it's the advisor or the teacher, we have a whole host of different support services, whether it's counseling, whether it's just the advisor themselves. We've got TRIO, we've got learning accommodations, tutoring, just all sorts of things, online learning if they need technology help. But everything like that will help support the student and hopefully help either counsel them in whatever direction they need, whether it's counseling out of the course or counseling as to how they can be successful in that course.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned counseling out of the course, and I think that that's one thing that we hear a lot from our clients is the ability to identify students that are at risk early enough in the term to give them some options. Maybe that course, they didn't know what they were getting into, or maybe there's a better choice for them, or maybe they took on too many courses. So the ability to save the student money, their time, and also not damage their GPA and transcripts, I think is really important too.
Well, along with that too, it gives us a chance to retain that student. So even though we're not necessarily retaining them in that course, if we can say, kind of like you said, that, well, maybe this course isn't the best fit for you, let's, if we recognize that within maybe the first even week of class, we can potentially get them into a new class, depending on, some instructors won't let them in late, but depending on the course, depending on the instructor, we can potentially still keep the student retained and just get them into a different course. And I think that's huge because we're not losing them, we're just moving them into something where they can be more successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it sounds like the communication between all members of the team are really important. Now, Tony, I know that you've done a really good job of motivating the sharing of information about students. So everybody's on the same page as to what's going on and what the student's history is. How do you encourage everybody that's working with a student to be able to share information and exchange that for the benefit of the student?
I think what Kona had mentioned earlier about faculty participation is huge. And so what we're developing at Pierce College is for online students is a program for achievement coaches that are designed around completion. And so what we do is 2 weeks prior to the start of the quarter, we'll send out some marketing ads and stuff like that to faculty, just letting them know what our intentions are for the upcoming quarter, welcoming them back to the quarter. So, for instance, from summer to fall, a lot of faculty have been off. So we'll welcome them back. Basically explain that we're back in the groove of things, and then we'll even request that we have faculty add a little blurb about the achievement coaches in their syllabus. That just kind of adds a little bit more weight to what we're able to do. But it also kind of stimulates more of the faculty involvement. Like, oh, this is a serious thing. What can we do? So you know, one of the reasons why we looked at Dropout Detective is because, unlike what you have, we have a large volume of adjunct faculty that may or may not want to be involved with the student success part of administrating how that works. So getting faculty to commit to notifying advisors when students have issues was a huge issue. And getting faculty to agree on the time frame, which was huge, was really significant, when the time frame to best report on students was huge, and so we couldn't seem to get them to agree on when they wanted to report to administrators or to advisors when their students were at risk. And so what Dropout Detective allowed us to do was only ask faculty to do what they do naturally, which is grade assignments, interact with students.
Not ask them to do anything more.
Anything above what they've intended to do, what they're getting paid to do.
Right.
And if they're inclined to do more, then that's great. But with that commitment, with the early commitment from faculty, then we move into the quarter, and we put a module in every class with the faculty's permission that basically breaks out what the achievement coaches do. So what they are, what the expectations are, how to set up an appointment, some of the things that excuse me, the achievement coaches can cover during an appointment, what the next couple of steps are if you get referred to an achievement coach by a faculty member, so stuff like that. So that module allows us to kind of be introduced to students at their own time. And so between faculty referrals and between students' self-directedness of kind of referring themselves, we've kind of got like a triangulation of support.
Awesome. I really like the idea of having that right in front of the student every time that they go into their course, having that in the modules. Even if I don't need it now, it's going to be available to me to go back and find that information if I need it later. Thanks. Now, Kris, I think if I recall correctly, you used to have checkpoints of certain times, maybe at the middle of the term and getting close to the end of the term. You would have specific checkpoints throughout the term when you were going to ask faculty or advisors to kind of flag students. How has that changed by having more data?
Sure. Our model's a little bit different in that we're more advisor-driven in how we use Dropout Detective. We started out for online only, so it was very easy to have checkpoints on a daily basis. Then in the last year, we moved to some special populations for our first generation and for our undecided students. And we have advisor departments for each of those special populations. So before we got Dropout Detective, it was incumbent upon the faculty to go into our student information system and use Retention Alert, which was an Ellucian or a DataTel product, but that meant they had to go outside of their teaching environment and enter all the data somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So now we're pulling that data from where they already are. So it's been very nice for the advisors to be able to have that data. So the next challenge is getting more of the campus faculty to use Canvas and to input things like attendance, assignments, grades, even if they're not running them through Canvas per se. If they just upload their spreadsheet, if they keep attendance, we use roll call attendance, it gives a lot of data for our advisors to work with. We do have some faculty advisors that use it, but it's more the advisors that are the drivers of the process. So it's made a huge difference, and that's why we moved to our other populations, we bought Dropout Detective thinking, hey, we're just going to use this for online.
Right.
But it's been so successful that when people realized our online and retention rates above 90%, that they figured, hey, something good's going on. So it's not quite the same for our campus population. There's different factors, different motivations from the students, but we're moving in that direction.
Awesome. Awesome. Speaking of roll call, Tony, I remember you kept coming, are you going to integrate to roll call? Are you going to integrate to roll call? And you were one of the key reasons why we did that. Why was that important to you?
That was important because in multiple conversations so at our college and probably like many colleges and universities out there, we have committees for committees. And so in every committee meeting, we would discuss student success tools, and I would mention Dropout Detective, and I would mention the performance that we've gotten as a result of it, how it works, and I kept getting feedback that, yeah, but that's for online students only, that's for online students only. And so a large percentage of our faculty, because SpeedGrader is so intuitive, use Canvas to input grades. And we know that if students aren't showing up for class, then they're not passing classes. We know that. And so attendance and grades are enough, it's enough data for us to get an at-risk indicator for students in web enhanced class or hybrid classes. And I felt very strongly that if we could integrate roll call, it would be a game changer as far as how the conversations go moving forward.
Awesome. Kris had mentioned his retention rate in the online courses being like 90%, which is phenomenal. I mean, really phenomenal. Kona also has excellent retention rates, but one thing that she's told me several times that I find really super amazing is her retention rates in her online courses are sometimes higher even than her ground-based courses, and that's almost unheard of. How in the world did you make that happen?
Well, I don't know how we made it happen other than, Dropout Detective is probably the biggest thing.
I wasn't leading you to that, I promise.
Okay. Well, we believe it. We don't even have a lot of I will say my budget has dropped significantly, and that's the one thing I've been able to retain in my budget because our college really sees the value and the fact that by retaining these students and having that high success rate, because for us, it's not just that they're being retained and that if you compare apples to apples, the same face-to-face class to online class, that quite often we're having higher, not statistically, I'm a statistics teacher, I will tell you it's not statistically significant higher, but it is, if you just look at the percentage, slightly higher than our face-to-face classes. But it's not just that retention, it's if you look at a pass rate of A, B, or C, that we are running neck and neck with them as well. There's no statistical difference between you taking your face-to-face class or you taking our online class and you passing that class with an A, B, or C, and you overall completing that course. And a lot of that we do attribute to Dropout Detective. I would like to think that, it has to do with, we have mandatory orientation, we have mandatory training, we do a lot of professional development. But honestly, if we didn't know which students we should be focusing the effort on, if we didn't know which students are the ones, instead of just doing this, shotgun approach, I'm just going to, email every student and say, if you need help, contact me. I'm going to know, here are my 3 students in my class that are really struggling, and I will send an individualized, email to each one of them, and I don't have to, search through Canvas to try to figure out why that student is getting a low grade. I can see right now from Dropout Detective the last time they submitted, the last time they were in the class, number of missing assignments, their grade. I can get all of that right there in Dropout Detective and click the message button and message the student at the same time. And for us, I think that's why we're able to get our faculty doing it, because I tell them, treat it like your email. You check your email every day. I said, just check Dropout Detective, those top couple students, if you haven't messaged them, if you haven't communicated with them, send it to them. So I think a lot of it is just training, having Dropout Detective, and having that easy access to data that they can then target the students that are having problems, or the students that maybe are still getting maybe a C, but maybe that student was getting an A or a B 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now they're getting a C. Well, in your online class, you might not really have noticed that, right? Because they're still getting a C, they're still passing. But with Dropout Detective, you can look at their overall rating and that they're going down. And you're like, wait a second, and you can look into it a little bit further. And I think that is priceless. I mean, that really, I teach online. I don't always pay attention to whether my A student has all of a sudden dropped to a C in 2 weeks. But by looking at Dropout Detective, I know that, and I can contact that student and say, hey, what's going on? What happened? And so I can catch them before they fail.
That makes sense, and I think that you made 2 great points. I'm going to follow up with you, Tony. One is that if you're spending so much time looking for at-risk students, you're not spending that time helping those students. So just the ability to free up that time, because like you've always said, students are not great at self-identifying. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. They're not really great at saying, hey, I need some help. And the second thing is, you're not necessarily looking always for students that are failing a course. It could just be a change in their pattern. And so, Tony, I know that you're a big fan of looking at a student's history and picking up on those things. Tell me your experience and how you use that.
Can I just piggyback on what Kona said first? So you mentioned attrition earlier in the session, and I'll just say that if you can reframe how we look at attrition, some types of attrition, we can also kind of look at that as a success. For instance, prior to Dropout Detective, a student may or may not have logged in to Canvas for the entire quarter. We wouldn't know that until the end of the quarter, and then that student gets an F. And so that's a lose-lose situation for us as an institution and as a student. What Dropout Detective allows us to do is strategize how we look at weeks in the quarter. So for the first week, if we're just looking at logins only, if we're not even looking at the performance of a student or submissions of assignments, we're just looking at are they accessing Canvas and are they logging into their class. That has made huge strides in how we advise students moving forward. And then talking about attrition, when I look at attrition from the perspective of persistence and saving that student the tuition for that quarter, because we were able to get them out before they owe the entire 100% or the 50% of the thing, and they're able to then re-register for that class for the next quarter. That's a success for us. That means that we were able to retain that student, and persistence can continue to move on. So I think as far as being able to identify students early on and strategize how you look at every week of the quarter really makes an impact, not just in completion percentages or GPA, but persistence overall in the student's academic career.
Excellent. Kris, you had originally started working with us with the online students, but over time, your ground-based faculty have started adopting Canvas more readily and using more features. How did you, and I think every school wants that. We want to take full advantage of the features in Canvas. Not only is it a benefit to the students, because the more faculty use the grade book and use Canvas, those faculty that aren't fully utilizing Canvas are going to hear those students saying, hey, so-and-so has their grades in there, will you update mine? How have you motivated faculty to take better advantage of the tools in Canvas?
Sure. For the online courses, it was easy because online students are much easier to identify and follow, and the faculty have all the materials in the course in Canvas. For the ground-based students, we've identified certain populations that are more at risk, certain populations that are less likely to continue at our school, so therefore we've targeted them. So we've really appealed to the faculty's sense of university spirit to help the students. It's good for them, it's good for us as a university, good for the students. So we've really tried making it simple for them. To have them go from not using Canvas or only to posting a syllabus or a couple of PowerPoints doesn't really help much. And, we're not going to get them to go to a fully utilized course, but if we can just get them to take their attendance and roll call, if we can just get them to take their grades and put them in there on a regular basis, some of those classes, the students weren't getting their grades. And that's a tragedy in itself, that the students don't know their feedback. So this helps the students. It helps us retain them because we can get a constant monitoring of them. So that was the biggest thing, just appealing to the faculty's sense of, you're here to help us, you're here to help the students, and it's good for all of us. And they were very receptive to that. Not to transforming their courses, but to taking steps and doing more and making it all work.
Okay, thank you. Kona, I remember that you have cited orientation courses, or student orientation courses, as one of the most powerful means of preparing the student and contributing to retention. What have you done special in your orientation courses that you think absolutely knocks it out of the ballpark that these folks can take advantage of?
Well, first of all, it's free in Commons. So go look it up and you can have it, use it. Also, because the no preview in Commons drives me insane, there's a link to the open course that you can actually click on it and look at all the content, so you can preview before you download. You can find it just by looking for Kona Jones. But why I think it works really well, first of all, we've been doing it for 8 years. So for 8 years, we've had a mandatory student orientation. And what that means is that no student is allowed access to their course until they complete the orientation. So even in Canvas, they're blocked from their courses until they finish this orientation course. The orientation course covers everything we think they need to be successful. So it's not only how to use Canvas, but it's how to be a good student. It's all the different resources that are available to them and how they can contact or get in touch with that resource or utilize that resource. And we feel it's been successful. That was actually the first thing we did. Before we were lucky enough to find Dropout Detective, we did actually implement the orientation, and we actually saw a 7% increase in our retention just from having a mandatory orientation. Then we kind of flatlined, and then we added Dropout Detective, and we shot up another 5 or 6 percentage points almost immediately. And so for us, it was wow. I mean, it's kind of cool if you look at our retention over time, because it was ooh, mandatory orientation, shot up. Then, okay, and then Dropout Detective shot back up, and we actually saw an increase for a couple years, and now we've kind of evened out, but we've evened out to where we're pretty much equal with our face-to-face. So without integrating some major changes in our teaching and our pedagogy and all of those types of things, I mean, I think we're doing really good, and we'd have to do something even crazier, which who knows? You might see me doing something crazy next year, but yeah.
Right. Now, you don't even have, or I should rather ask, do you have advisors that are assigned specifically to your online students?
Not specifically to just online students. Our advisors, they actually, it's not really a science other than alphabetically, that certain advisors get certain letters in the alphabet. So it's not assigned advising based on online or not. But it's still, our faculty or our advisors know, they can tell which students are online only students. And so we kind of flag that. Also, I have a report I run, so I know all of my online students, all of the classes they're taking, whether they've completed the orientation, what they're doing, and then I've got Dropout Detective that we just pull all together. In fact, I will say, when we first got it, you didn't have all the bells and whistles that they have now, and I was begging for can I have this report? Can I have that? Can I have this? And I will say Dropout Detective has just continued to add features all the time. I'm getting an email saying, guess what, we added this feature, and it's like Christmas. I'm seriously, there's a couple where I was almost in tears, oh my God, you did, thank you. When they did the history was the one that I really, really, that was the one. You might have been real, I was history. I was can we have the history? Can I have the history?
And so the thing is, show of hands for anyone who advises or is in that department, show of hands if you can show a causal effect of whatever your advising interaction is for the students that you advise or you see. I'm just curious.
How do you know what you're doing is working or not?
How do you know that when your students have completed that advising session and whatever intervention you've implemented had an impact on that student's course throughout the quarter of the semester? One more time. There is a lot of compounding factors, that's true. That being said, with Dropout Detective, what I love about history is that when you intervene with a student and you input notes into the system, an icon comes up in the history section of that tab. So what that allows other administrators to do and advisors to do and faculty to see is that whatever interaction occurred on that day, you can see, we don't know for sure because of the compounding factors, but you can see some type of relationship between the interaction that occurred and the performance of that student based on the risk indicator. And that's more than what we ever had before Dropout Detective.
I don't know what to say
Kudos.
after that.
Yeah, that's, yes, everything he said, yes.
Kris, how, between your face-to-face courses and your online courses, is there any differentiation in how your outreach to those students or your advising model, whether I'm working with a ground-based or an online student?
Yeah, for the online students, it's regular touch points, but it's more being like a watchdog, where for the campus students, it's much more interactive and proactive because we have some real obvious groups that don't do as well for us and need some additional help. And in the past, like I think Tony had mentioned, you wait until the end of the semester and then it's too late. If they've had a bad experience, if they've failed, if they just didn't get grades and feedback, they're gone. And there's nothing you can do, it's too late. But this way you can catch them. We can be aware right away if something's missing, if they didn't show up for a class. Maybe they had a good reason, maybe they didn't, but we'll have that conversation. And it really does help. It really helps the students feel a part of something. The students don't feel what's happening in Dropout Detective. They feel the effect of what's happening. So they're not noticing anything themselves, but they're just noticing the advisors care about them. And it's like, you know, oh, I just missed the class this morning and I'm getting a call from the advisor. Wow, somebody cares. So that's real powerful. It really is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've always said that I thought, you know, you can send as many automated messages and text messages to students, and I think those are good nudges. I think those are good reminders, but really that one-on-one communication, that personal touch with a student, that's what's going to save a student. But can we save every student? Is every student savable, Kona?
I would love to say yes, but since I'm a teacher and I would like to think I try to do everything, I think there's certain students, and that's where you just have to work at trying to counsel them into the best thing for them right then. I've had students who have made it so far that at that point it didn't matter if they dropped, and they said, well, can I just keep coming to class, so at least when I retake this class, you know, maybe I'll have picked up something more. Where some students, if they're drop at a certain point, they're financially going to be better off, and for our school and for the school rates, they'll look better. But unfortunately, you can't save everybody, but at least with Dropout Detective, I feel that we're saving a heck of a lot more of them and getting them into a better situation or keeping them enrolled and allowing them to complete that course.
Excellent. Tony, one question for you. I know that you monitor certain student populations based on whether it's international students or different groups, different programs. Do you have individual advisors assigned to each group of students, or do your advisors work across the board?
It's a combination of both. So our student success manager for our athletes, when he logs into Dropout Detective, he just sees his caseload of athletes. Yeah. For our trio department, there are 3 advisors, and because they co-advise, they wanted to have it so that everyone sees everyone's caseload. For international ed, it's kind of like the athletic department where it's just one person. And then for our achievement coaches, they see the entire caseload of everyone. And so, you know, you kind of play around with it. I remember when we did a pilot for our Running Start program, and initially they didn't want to see each other's caseload.
Yeah. And
what they found out was it works better to just see everyone. And I made an email, and it was changed. So a little bit of play to figure out what works best, but nothing is permanent, and that's what I like about it is you can kind of flip flop depending on what works for you.
Yeah. We're about to go to questions, but before we do, Kris, is there anything else in your secret agent toolkit that you find really useful in communicating with students and actually having them hear you and make a difference?
I think it's nice to be real specific with the students. It's one thing to bring a student in and say, hey, how are things going? And there's value in that kind of relationship too. But I think there's more value in saying, hey, you missed class today, and maybe you missed 2 different classes, or maybe you didn't go to any classes on Monday. That kind of interaction, you can really start a good conversation with a student. So that's the most powerful thing, is that you can be real specific and you can be meaningful and you can identify trends with a student. Maybe a student, like you had said, sometimes you see students dip. If a student was doing well and all of a sudden 1 week they're missing class, they're not submitting assignments, something's going on. Maybe it's school related, maybe they couldn't pay their bill, maybe something's going on at home, but you can really determine that, and that you can have a good conversation with the student. So that's the most meaningful part, is it gets really one-to-one, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think starting the conversation, that's step one. You have to start that conversation to build that relationship, to know what's going on. So makes perfect sense.
It changes the entire complexion of the conversation. Whereas before, advisors would say, so how are things going? How are things going in this class? And the student would say, well, I started off kind of rocky, but I emailed the professor and I just got to turn in these assignments and I'll be okay by the end of the week, and I just got to do this and I just got to do that. But with Dropout Detective, without even letting the student know how much detail we have,
You're missing 47 assignments.
We get specificity. So instead of saying, well, how are you doing, and do you need to go to the writing center and blah, 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 we can ask a specific question about a specific assignment. And then the student's eyes go bing, like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I could use that. But also it changes the conversation for at the end of the quarter for dismissal and probation hearings. So if we get a student who is in for probation at the end of the quarter, and he or she is like, I was great all quarter, and my aunt passed away, and the last 2 weeks have been before Dropout Detective, we just have to take that person's word for it, right? But now with Dropout Detective, we can pull up the whole history of that student's quarter, and if it's sure enough, if we see things were going good and then the last 2 weeks dropped off, then it's a different conversation. But if they were read for the entire from the start to the finish, it's a different conversation. So it changes things dramatically.
That makes sense. Before we go to questions, I would like to acknowledge my awesome team over here, and please feel free to stop by the exhibit hall later today and say hello to them. They are the people that make all the magic happen, so we appreciate you guys being here with us. All right, so let's open the floor for any questions that our fantastic panelists here can answer for you. Don't be shy. Any questions? Yes, please. So the question is about DegreeWorks and how the solutions that they offer are different. I'm not personally familiar enough with their solutions to answer that, honestly. Have any of you had any? No? Okay.
We haven't used that. We've had conversations about that or similar. That works more on a macro level because you're watching students progress, whereas this is more the micro level, the day-to-day of what the students are doing. And for our students, yes, it's important to know how they're progressing through their degree, but it's probably more important to figure out what's going on in their day-to-day lives that's stopping them. We have a couple of courses that are really identified as the stop courses for students, math being one of them. So we can really dig into math and what's going on in the class, not how it works compared to the other classes. So not a direct answer, but.
So am I kind of hearing that DegreeWorks, it's not, this system and DegreeWorks, they kind of solve two different things, they're not even in the same place?
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption, yeah.
Question in the back?
Yeah. My college is just moving on Starfish, which I do sort of. But one thing I wanted to know
Mhm.
But can the counselor also see the campus course, like you were talking about the assignment, like that people actually see the assignment, you just see the record that they're having to follow to a certain assignment?
Right, so the question is whether advisors have the ability to go into a course to actually see the assignments that the student may have missed or not submitted specifically. We piggyback on the permissions of the user in Canvas. If the user has permissions to go into a course level, then yes, and most, I'd say at least half, if not more of our counselors and advisors that work with us do have those permissions. If they don't, we're not going to override that user's permissions. Do you allow your counselors to go into courses?
We've opened up roles for them to go into.
Yeah, we have two separate roles. One is more of a advisor, director who can go into the courses, and then some of our advisors who do more of the day-to-day stuff can't see the courses. So there's different levels for different roles.
Yeah, and many of our schools do have multiple roles for counselors, some that they will allow and some that they don't, so that makes sense. Yes, sir?
Have you guys scripted a tactful way for faculty and advisors to initiate that conversation with students? I imagine you don't want faculty or an advisor saying, "You're number one on my Dropout Detective list."
Your risk score is 100 today. What in the world?
I imagine you probably don't even want them using the word Dropout Detective. So I was wondering if you guys had sort of scripted that, have a common language that the various contact points are using when they're addressing the issues with students.
I think that's a really good question. And the way that we approach it is the student's risk indicator doesn't define the student, right? So it's more of this is just more of information for us to build rapport and build a relationship with the student than basically, saying that you're a failure because you got a 98 today. It really doesn't, we believe it doesn't define the student at all. It's really just a snapshot, a moment in time that gives us information to then make a decision based on what's best for the student. Does that?
I can also add to that in that I think as soon as you try to say, here's the standard language, students smell that from a mile away and they'll stop paying attention because you're dehumanizing it. They're not a real person. They're just, once again, they're that text message, they're that nudge of automate of, oh, anyone below this grade gets this message. And I don't do that. I mean, I'll tell faculty, if you want to contact a student, here's resources you can direct the student to if you think they need these things. But I would never, what if the student was getting certain types of emails from an instructor all semester, and then all of a sudden they got this really weirdly worded that didn't sound like the instructor message? They'd be like, what? And especially if they started getting similarly worded messages from other instructors or the advisor, it wouldn't be human anymore. And for me, I would far rather the instructor who might already have a relationship with that student in some capacity or the advisor to word it in whatever way is appropriate for them to have that conversation with the student. And ultimately, I guess, I believe I trust my faculty and my advisors. They're not, we don't say, well, Dropout Detective, but I guess I never thought I had to have that conversation. And now that you said that, now I'm scared and thinking, oh my gosh, has one of my faculty had that conversation with a student? And I truly don't believe they do, but for me, online courses and courses in general, it has to be humanized. It has to be human to human. And as soon as you try to, here's the form letter you fill out, you've lost the really big value, and that's knowing exactly why that student is having issues. And whether it's a snapshot or not, it's still for that specific student. These are the issues, which might be completely different from the number 2 student. They're two different things.
Very true, very true. Well, we are out of time, so I'd like to, again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you guys have in the exhibit hall this afternoon. Thank you.